All right. Welcome to the show, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started with today's virtual field trip brought to you by Learn Around the World. If this is your first experience on the Learn Around the World program, this is interactive for everyone out there today. If you're on or off of camera, for everyone, you can send in your questions via the Q&A app at the bottom of your screen, or you can use hashtag GEOshow if you are a Twitter user. I only follow the hashtag GEOshow, so please do not @ me if you know my handle on Twitter. All right, log into Kahoot.it to play along with our quiz questions at the end of the show. Enter in today's game pin at Kahoot.it, 21 22 52 3, and you'll be linked right up to our in-show quizzing. If you win today's quiz, you'll win a postcard from me, GOB, from the Learn Around the World Studios. All right, and if you stump me on any questions about the Mayans, I don't know everything about the Mayans, by the way, but if you stump me on any questions, we'll research those questions and post the answers over to flipgrid.com. Feel free to use that space to share your research about Mayans as well. All right, explorers, it's that time of the day. Are you guys ready?
Yeah!
All right, GeoShow's now live. Let's do it, guys.
Perfect.
All right. Welcome to the GeoShow. The title of today's program is Los Maya, or the Maya, brought to you by Learn Around the World. All right, we're kicking off today's show with our first survey question. So if you're playing along with Kahoot, go ahead and grab your devices. Here's how we use Kahoot here on the Geo Show. We only give you 10 seconds to answer a question, so not a lot of time, explorers. Also, you must look at the screen where you see me now to see the questions and the answers. Don't look right down at your devices. You will only see color-coded buttons on your devices to answer with. So let's go ahead. You know, the best way to learn is by doing, right? So let's go ahead and launch that first survey question. If you're not logged in yet, don't worry. You'll have time to do so. The first one is not worth points. Again, that game pin is on your screen, 21 22 52 3. That's also located in your chat box, teachers. All right, here we go, guys. We are talking about the Maya today, and we're going to somewhere in the world. So where are the ancient Maya cities located? Are they in South America, Central America, Asia, or Europe? What do you guys think? All right, they are in Central America. So let's find out. If you don't know where that is, let's go ahead to the map. You are watching the Geo Show. We are a geography-based program, so location matters. All right, if we spin our big blue ball around, let's go ahead and find out where we're headed on today's virtual field trip. We're actually going to two countries today. We are going to Guatemala, and we are going to southern Mexico. We're going to talk intensely about two locations, the Palenque ruins located in Mexico and the Tikal site located in Guatemala. We'll have time, if we have a bonus section, and if we have time, we'll talk a little bit about Tulum ruins, which was a later city that's located right on the coast of the Yucatan Peninsula on the Caribbean Sea. So this is a very small city that was around in the 1500s when the Spanish arrived. It still had people there, and we may look at that in a bonus section. But everyone, we're definitely going to look at the Palenque city that is located in Chiapas, in the Chiapas region in Mexico. They were famous for their artwork and architecture. And then we're also going to see Tikal in Guatemala. And Tikal, you can think of it as like the modern New York City of the Maya world, meaning it had lots of very tall pyramids. It was one of the biggest cities in the Maya world. They were strong, they were powerful, and we'll learn all about the city in Tikal as well. So briefly about the Mayans. So this area about the Maya, I should say, this area of the world sometimes is referred to as Mesoamerica. So Mesoamerica is a term that we give to this region before the Spanish arrived, in the 1500s. So we can also call the people there Mesoamericans. Some of the Mesoamerican cultures that we find that were here before the Spanish arrived and when the Spanish arrived were the Aztec, the Zapotec, and who we're going to focus on today, which are the Maya. Now, the Maya inhabited regions today known as the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico, Guatemala, Belize, Honduras, and El Salvador. All right, so the Maya, where did they come from? Well, they migrated from central Mexico about 12,000 years ago into the lowlands of Guatemala and Belize, Honduras, and El Salvador primarily, and the Yucatan Peninsula. And we refer to them in two different periods, but the classic period, or sometimes you can think of it as the golden age as well. This is when they were making all their best artwork. The cities were at their height from about 250 AD to 900 AD. This is when Palenque and Tikal were really thriving cities. And then the post-classic period, around 800, 900 AD, many of these classic cities were abandoned. The people, there was starvation because of droughts, and people kind of revolted against their rulers and moved into more rural communities and into the northern parts of the Yucatan. All right, so those are our locations we're talking about today. And we have a couple classrooms with us today. We want to go ahead and introduce them. First, we have Mrs. Kazanek's classroom, second graders from Illinois. Welcome to the show, guys. Hi. All right, and do we have any fun facts from your classroom about the Maya today?
Hi, my name is Aubrey, and the Maya invented the concept of zero. The Maya number system was based on 20.
All right, that is such a great fun fact. And we're going to look at what symbol they use for zero in just a little bit. So yes, they came up with the concept of zero way before Europeans did over in Europe. And zero is very important in math. So if any math fans here, in fact, the Maya were brilliant in math and astronomy. And so they tracked solar eclipses and cycles of the planets thousands of years ahead of time. That's how good at math they were. And are. And let's go ahead and introduce. We have next Mrs. Campos, fifth graders from Illinois as well. Welcome to the show, guys. Hi. All right, and do we have any fun facts about the Maya from your classroom today? All right, well, we'll come back to you guys if you want to share it later on in the show. And when we start opening up for questions, feel free to do it then as well. So we're going to go ahead and start on our virtual field trip and seeing some of these locations. So first, where are we going to go? Tikal, Palenque, Tikal, Palenque. I don't know. You do, though. And you're going to choose over on Kahoot. So go ahead and grab your devices. What city do you want to see first on your virtual field trip today? Don't choose Tulum because we're not going there first. All right, which one do you want to visit first? Palenque in Mexico, red, or Tikal in Guatemala, yellow? All right, looks like we have a tie. Well, you know who gets to break the tie? That's right, I do. So I'm going to choose today, and I'm going to choose to start off over at Palenque. Let's start with Palenque today. Palenque is located in the Chiapas region in Mexico. And abracadabra, we are now in Mexico. I hope you all have your virtual passports with you. Can't travel internationally without passports. All right, so Palenque, also known as a water city, has quite a few rivers running through it, and the Maya controlled water at Palenque. And one of the ways they did that, as I'll show you, is they used something called the Corbel Arch, which we'll see a lot today. Speaking of the Corbel Arch, we're going to walk through a hallway right now that's built with the Corbel Arch. And the thing about Palenque is many of the pyramids. It used to believe that the pyramids in the Maya world were not used for burial like they were in Egypt. But today we know that, in fact, they did use them for burial. In fact, these are some tombs that we're looking at right now inside of one of the pyramids. And you can come here and visit this here today in Palenque. Now, on the inside here, I just want everyone to look. This is a red color, a deep red color that's on the inside of that tomb. Well, this deep red color they used a lot on the outside of their buildings. So as we walk around the city ruins today, when we see these pyramids and old buildings, it just looks like old stone and old rock. Well, we need to use our imaginations because the Maya would have painted them, and they would have been, here at Palenque, they used blues and reds. At Tikal, which we'll see next, they used red colors primarily. As you can see, it's really wet in here, and that's because all the water, it rains here a lot at Palenque. And this building right here, this temple, is called the Temple of Inscriptions. And the reason it's called the Temple of Inscriptions, you see this room at the top of the pyramid. Well, inside of that pyramid, about 640 glyphs. We'll learn what glyphs are, but they were found inside of this room, and that's where it got its name by, or archaeologists gave this temple its name, the Temple of Inscriptions. These were very important for learning a lot about Palenque and about the Maya. So this is the palace. We'll come back and look at the palace in a minute, but let's trek to the top of a hill behind the palace so we can get an overlook of the entire city here. Here's a waterway, and again, they control water. That palace had indoor running water. Can you believe that, guys? Indoor running water. So this is before the year 800 AD. By the time they left, they abandoned Palenque in about 799 is the last date that's recorded here. And they had running water before that. Now, about 90% of Palenque is covered by jungle. So you see that the jungle is encroaching, is swallowing up everything. It takes a lot of work to keep the jungle cut back. Now, it did not take as much work when people were living here because many people were living in the city, and that was their day-to-day task, was to take care of this place. But today it's just an archaeological site. It's a park to come visit. So they only keep the most famous places cleared. It takes a lot of work. I learned that time to time, they even take power washers and power wash like those front steps that we're looking at right now. And that keeps a lot of the vegetation from growing on it. And it's impossible to keep it all off because you'll see it. Now, on the top of this pyramid, we're at what's called the cross group. That's this up top here. Now, Pikal the Great is the king that was buried in the Temple of Inscriptions, and his son built the cross group that we see here. Now, the Temple of Inscriptions is located right here. That's what we just saw, those tombs that we walked in, and I was talking about those glyphs, and that's located right next to the palace. Now, the palace we're going to go visit next. And all around, see, all around in the forest here, there are more ruins, more smaller pyramids and temples all around that, again, most of the city is covered up by forest. Now, as you trek around in this part of the world, it's very hot. So you always want to drink plenty of water when you're exploring, especially in tropical environments. There's 2 seasons in this part of the world. There's a wet season and a dry season, and it's hot all year round. All right, remember I said they had water in the palace, and one of the ways they controlled water is and made walkways over the water that they controlled here is they built and made use of something called a corbel arch. We'll learn all about it today, and I'm just going to show you examples whenever we see them. It was a common building technique that the Maya used in their buildings and their pyramids. And so this is the palace, and when we walk up onto the palace, we saw a little bird taking a break, getting a little relief from the hot sun here in that little hole, just hanging out. And when we look at the side, when we get a closer look here, is we see some white stuff that's kind of spread on the wall. And this stuff right here is called stucco. Can you guys say stucco?
Stucco.
All right, stucco is something we're going to learn more about what stucco is, but basically it's crushed limestone that's then boiled in water, and it makes like a plaster. And what happens is that plaster, they would spread that stucco, they spread evenly all over the walls of the outsides of the pyramid, and it has a white color. So we need to use our imaginations. All the buildings that we see, remember I said they were painted? Well, they were covered with stucco first, and so you would have bits of it that were painted blue, some of it was painted red, and the rest of it would have a nice white color to it from that stucco. So it would have been looked much, much different in the year 799, the last recorded date. This is inside the palace. This is actually the war room. So this is where the, you can think of this as the Pentagon of Palenque. This is where the generals and the king would come meet. A common person like you and I, if we were not in the royal family or in the upper military, we would not be allowed in here. But this is where they would come. And when we think about war now, who were they fighting? Well, you may be surprised to know. Well, here's I want to show you really quickly. This is a tower. So no other city in the Maya world was a tower built, only here at Palenque. And so Palenque was really famous for their artwork again. So here's examples of some of that art that is located in some of the rooms on top of the temples. Now, much of the artwork was taken out and put into a museum that's close by, but they left some of it here. And you can see that there's a picture, there's the art in the middle here. And then on the sides, we're going to learn about these in a minute, but these are called glyphs. And that's the type of writing that the Maya used. All right, and that's Palenque again, a very wet water city. And the Temple of Inscriptions is 85 feet tall, so not as tall as what we're going to see at our next location in Tikal. Really quickly, inside the Temple of Inscriptions, remember I said it was once believed that the pyramids of the Maya were not used as tombs. Today we know that's not true because they were used as tombs. And the first tomb ever discovered in the Maya world was here at Palenque in the Temple of Inscriptions. This is where Tikal the Great was buried. Tikal the Great actually had a speaking tube up here. And so if after he died, if you were one of the people that lived here, you could walk up to the top of the pyramid and you could speak through that speaking tube, and that speaking tube went all the way down into the tomb. So this is a way that you could communicate with Tikal the Great even after death, because they believed that they were godlike, their rulers. And so if you want to know what a speaking tube is, if you've ever been to a playground that has those tubes, you can speak to your best friend on the other side of the playground. It goes like through the jungle gym and you can hear their voice going all the way on the other side. That's what a speaking tube is. And so here's a tomb here that we were able to see. That's not Tikal the Great's tomb. Tikal the Great's tomb is actually, they took it out and it's actually located in the museum. Again, some of that artwork they protect on the outside here. And we found that in the this upper room up here at the top of this pyramid in the cross group. Again, the tower only built or only found here at Palenque, and these are examples of glyphs and art that was carved into that stucco. The good thing about stucco is it's very malleable, so it's very soft before it dries, so you can carve right into it. So it's great for making art and for writing. So Palenque, I was saying that sometimes Maya would war with other people. Now they were typically at war with themselves. So here's the thing. Lots of people, when we talk about the Maya today, the Maya, even though they shared common religion, many of them common languages, but there were about 40 or so city-states. Now, a city-state, if you think about, say, the ancient Greeks, for example, is another common society with city-states. So each one of these cities acted as their own little mini country. It's like in the USA, if New York, LA, and Chicago, and Atlanta, for example, were their own, they each had their own president, and they each had their own armies, and some of them were friends and they were friendly, and some of them were enemies and they would fight. This is how the Maya world worked. So all of them, they would have trade with one another. Some of the cities were enemies and some of the cities were friends. And so not all of them, even though that they shared lots of things in common, like recreation, food, religion, language in some cases, not all of them were friendly with one another. And we call this city-states. Okay, so we're going to open up the floor for some questions. Go ahead. If you're from the outside, I encourage you to send your questions in early and often using the Q&A app or the hashtag GEOshow. We do give random shout-outs here on the GEOshow, and our first random shout-out today is going to Meadowlark Elementary in Montana. Big shout-out to you guys in Montana. And let's do Rockford Elementary in Tennessee. Big shout-out to you guys as well. And also, I do have a no-show today. We have an on-camera spot that's open. I will take the first person in the chat box if you want to be bumped up to be an on-camera guest. Remember, this is a publicly viewed show, so you must have the permissions to be on camera. Okay, let's go over to, let's see, Carol Stream. Sorry, do you guys have any questions so far?
Hi, my name is Kayla. How did they build the pyramids so tall without the machines we have today?
You know what? That's a great question. And it's even more impressive because check it out. Not only did they not have machines in the Maya world, but they had no beasts. Now, what do I mean by that? They had no horses. They had no ox. They had no elephants like Southeast Asian countries had when they were building Angkor Wat, for example. So everything was built with human power. One of the ways they moved the blocks is they would use this strap. They would put a strap around their head and wrap that around a big block. So when you walk with the block on your back and the strap around your head, that would help you carry it. And so maybe you guys can make something similar to that and try carrying around your book bag. Throw your book bag strap over your forehead and try to carry it around like that with your books. Now imagine doing that with big heavy blocks, right? And here's something else. Even though that they came up with the concept of zero, as we're going to learn, they used a different symbol. So the symbol was not how we think of a zero today. So it was not in a circle or a wheel shape. The Maya had no wheel. So this makes it even more impressive. So even they had no animals, they had no carts or wagons to pull this heavy block with. And everything was made with chisel, so hammer and chisel. And the reason they could do that because much of the block that they used was limestone. Limestone is a very soft stone that you can carve and you can cut more easily than some other harder forms of rock. So great question. And so yeah, it's very impressive. We still don't know exactly how they did all of their building. And part of the reason a lot of information has been lost about the Maya is because they had the most sophisticated writing system of any of the indigenous people in the Americas before Europeans came. And most of their books were burned by the Catholic Church. When they came over, they wanted to get rid of their religion and they burned all their books. And unfortunately, it's unfortunate because much of their history has been lost unless it was carved in stone, or there's actually 4 books that survived. We call them the codices today. But yeah, much of their history was burned and is lost forever. Let's go over to our other classroom in Illinois, to our 5th graders. Do you guys have any questions so far?
What kind of language did the Maya speak?
Right, so they spoke Mayan, and we're going to learn the difference between the 2 words. But and I used to do this myself all the time. So when we talk about Maya, the people or the buildings or the cities, we use the word Maya. So it's a noun and an adjective. So the Maya people spoke Mayan. Mayan is the languages. And the languages, there were around 29 to 30 or so Mayan languages. And so some of them spoke similar languages. Some of them spoke different languages. But they were all considered to be within the Mayan family of languages. The Mayan family of languages. Yeah, so they spoke different one. The only Mayan I know is Matios. Can you guys say Matios?
Matios.
And Matios means thank you in Amaya language that is close to southern Guatemala, close to Pacaya volcano is where I learned to say that. All right, so let's go ahead, and lots of questions are coming in about the Maya. So let's learn a little bit more about their writing and the Maya in general, and a couple of vocabulary words before we move on. Again, Maya versus Mayan. Very commonly you read about the Maya people, and it's a mistake. People write, they say the Mayan people or the Mayan calendar. That's an incorrect use of the term. Mayan means the family of languages. There are about 29 to 32 Maya languages, and Maya is a noun and an adjective. So we use this to talk about the pieces, the people, the places, and the things of Maya. All right, Corbel Arch, which we've already learned about a little bit about. Can you guys say Corbel Arch? All right, so the Corbel arch is a building technique that was used, and you put blocks on top of each other, and one by one you move them closer and closer and closer together until you get to the top. This is not a true arch. A true arch has a semicircle design to it, where Corbel arch is very narrow. If you look on the bottom left, this was at Palenque where we were just at in the palace. So you can make narrow walkways. You cannot make big, wide rooms with a Corbel arch, but it is fairly strong, and that's how you can build and hold up buildings on top of rivers and over rivers, as we saw at Palenque. And here's an example that you guys just saw. So at our next site, we're going to see many of these. These are called stelas and altars. Can you guys say stela? Stela. And altar. Okay, so stelas and altars typically in the Maya world are found together. They're usually as a combo. And the stela is the one that's standing vertically or standing up tall, standing up straight. The altar is the one that's laying down flat. So stelas typically had pictures and they're writing on it, where the altars had writing on it as well. And the altars were typically used in ceremonies, religious ceremonies. And we'll learn a little bit about those as we see them. And again, stucco. Can you guys say stucco? Stucco. Okay, stucco. So stucco is crushing down that limestone and then boiling it in water until it gets down to a thick paste. And then you can spread that thick paste all over the buildings. You can make statues out of it. You can carve writing into it. Lots of things you can do with stucco, just like you would use plaster in art class today. And as you walk around, you can see evidence of that stucco that kind of drips down because it gets washed off over the years. Water does dissolve that limestone. All right, and here's on the left, we see an example of artwork or a statue made with stucco. And here's an example of jewelry to the right that was found at Palenque. They used a lot of jade in their jewelry as well. And then their writing. So the Maya had the most sophisticated writing, and they wrote with something called glyphs. Can you guys say glyphs? Glyphs. So glyphs are, you may have heard of hieroglyphs before, like the Egyptians, but a glyph is a writing system that uses pictures. Does anyone here write with pictures today? No? You guys don't? Has anyone ever used emojis before? Yes. Ah, so you do write with pictures. I wrote Hearts GEOshow. Awesome. Right. So emojis, we do the same thing today, guys. It's a little bit easier today to hit a button and magically draw a heart really quickly. Obviously, it took a lot of skill to write in glyphs. And so that's why letters became popular. Well, it's kind of funny how things go in cycles. And today people are writing back in glyphs again. They're writing with emojis again today. So this is an up close shot. The way that it works is it had a square format or layout, and depending on what the picture you used and where the picture was located in that square would determine the word. I do not know how to read glyphs. There are people that do. It was called the Maya code that was cracked. And they did that using those codices, those 4 books I was telling you about. Not only can you that they would write them in books, but they would also carve them in the stucco as we see today. The stucco is all we have left besides those 4 codice paper books, because most of those were burned. All right, so I'm going to teach you how to read Mayan numbers, because I do know how to do that. And as we learned from our fun facts earlier about the number 0, so the Mayan numbers, at least the lower numbers, are pretty easy to learn. So they use a circle for the number 1. They use, or the ones place, I should say, and they use a bar for 5s and a seashell for 0. Again, the Maya they came up with the concept of 0 before anyone else did. Separately, the number 0 was come up with by other cultures, but at a later time. I believe Maya were the first in time to do so. And then we have, how does that work together? Okay, so if we use 1 dot, that's 1, 2 is 2, 3 is 3, 4 is 4, and then a bar is 5. Okay, let's put some of these together. What do you guys think 2 bars and 2 dots together is? Let's go over to Mrs. Compost's classroom. What do you guys think?
12.
12. All right, 12. So 2 bars is 10 and 2 dots is 2. 10 plus 2 is 12. Okay, what about, let's do 3 bars and 3 dots. What do you guys think over in Carroll Springs? What is that?
33.
Okay, well, 5, 5, 5 is 15 plus 3 is what?
18.
18. Okay, so we have 18 there. And this is a trick question. Let's, what do you guys think seashell, which we know is 0, with a dot on top of it? What do you think that is?
1.
Okay, well, I know it's a trick question, but the reason it's put here is because, look, we have 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. What do you think it is now? 20. So when we put a dot over the seashell, that makes the number 20. So now you guys know how to count from 1 to 20 using Mayan numbers. How cool is that? All right, so we are going to head to our next location. Again, we encourage you to send in your questions early and often. Mrs. Bordner's classroom wants to know, did the Maya celebrate holidays? Yeah, they had many different holidays. I don't know all of those. Many of those would be around harvests. So when they would have the corn harvest, the Maya had many gods. So they had around 165 gods. And so there would be celebrations for different times of the year. They had rain gods. So all sorts of traditions, customs, and celebrations that revolved around their gods and their religion and their day-to-day life. All right, Mrs. Jones' classroom wants to know, how long did it take them to build the temples? These temples were built over, or the cities were built over a long period of time, hundreds of years. I mean, each pyramid did not take 100 years. Hundreds of years, the cities themselves. And each one, depending on the size of the temple, obviously is going to be a different length of time. Okay, and let's go over and we're going to head over to Tikal, to our second location today. This one's located in a different country. We're going to Guatemala. Now remember, these countries that we have today, Mexico and Guatemala and Belize, was not a thing when the Maya were here. It was just the city-states that were spread out. So abracadabra, we are now at the visitor center in northern Guatemala, and we're going to take a look at the Tikal ruins. So what we're looking at here now is a model of Tikal, and most of Tikal, over 90%, just like at Palenque, is under the forest today. And we are going to head and focus into one main spot today. Is we're going to look at the Grand Plaza. The Grand Plaza has Temple 1 and Temple 2 that we're going to see both of these. We'll go on top of Temple 2. We'll walk by Temple 3. We won't stop at Temple 3. We're going to go to Temple 4, which is the biggest temple at Tikal. Also something I call the Star Wars temple. We'll learn about that as well. And so, yeah, but a lot we won't see because it's just so massive. This is a huge, huge area. Remember, this was considered, or I like to say it's like the New York City of the Maya world, meaning their pyramids, they were so tall, a lot taller than what we'll see compared to Palenque. And the size of the city was one of the biggest. It was one of the first and one of the most powerful of the classic Maya world. world. This is one of the trees that is located in the forest here. This is called a sayabir tree. And the Mayas, this was important to the Maya in this area. They believed it connected their three worlds, the heavens, the earth, the living world, and the underworld. And when we walk through going towards the ruins, we see lots of jungle on each side of the road here, and we're going to cut through the jungle and walk through there. Now, keep in mind, this area that we're at right now, all of these trees, everything would have been cleared out. So we're going to the main, the central part of the city where all the skyscrapers, in quotes, all the pyramids and temples are. And so we're headed to the main part of the city. But when people were living here, this whole area would have been completely inhabited by people. It would have been small wooden structures. They have long gone. They're no longer left here today. All right, so I'm going to turn the volume up for you guys. Often here on the Geo Show, we use something called the deer ears. So if you cup your hands, put your fingers together, make little cups, put them behind your ears, really tight behind the lobes of your ears, you should be able to hear better now. You have deer ears, and point your deer ears towards the speakers. If you've never been to the jungle before, it's quite loud. Listen to all the insects. All right, so as we walk out of the forest, we see our first mound. And we're going to see many mounds that look like a hill or a rock pile. And they're not really a hill. What they are is they're actually pyramids. And so remember, we said much of the forest is still covered up. The back side of that pyramid is still covered up. This is the front side of the grass hill that you were just looking at. So they keep the front side uncovered, but it takes a lot of work to keep it all uncovered when the jungle keeps trying to grow on top of it. We're going to walk up these steps. Be careful. See how steep they are. There's no hand railings. All right, on top of the pyramid here, this is very different than the Egyptian pyramids that people think about. Egyptian pyramids are look something like this with an apex on the top, so a pointed part, an apex on the top of it, whereas the pyramids here in the Maya world typically have a flat top to them, like one that we're on now, because it was used for ceremonies and rituals. It was made to be used, not just to look at as a tomb. This is Temple 1, Jaguar Temple. We see it sticking out over the canopy. The canopy is the roof of the forest, the treetops. We call that the tree canopy. So Jaguar Temple is 150 feet tall, so that's almost double of that temple of inscriptions that we saw at Palenque earlier. When we go down on the ground, remember those two stone pieces we saw put together? We call those stelas and altars. The stelas and the altars, we see many of them laid out here in front of the temple. Remember earlier I was saying that they were used for ceremonies and rituals. So what they were used for is the altars, they were used for bloodletting and sacrificing. So bloodletting is if you cut yourself or prick yourself and you drip blood out onto the altar as you're praying, and sacrificing is when an animal or a human were killed in that prayer to the gods. And the Maya participated in both human and animal sacrifices. As you can see here, under that mound is a pyramid. So you see the evidence walking all through the old parts. And look at the old stelas and altars that aren't kept in as good a condition as the other ones that we saw. So this is what much of Tikal was like before much of it was uncovered in the late 1800s. So when this area, the Tikal, was abandoned, that means the people left the city, and 879 was the last date recorded here. And so when people left it, the forest just overgrew it. And so for about 1,000 years, the forest just grew and grew and grew on top of this city. And until in the late 1800s, when archaeologists came back here and started uncovering much of the old Tikal city. So this is Jaguar Temple. So that This is the backside that we just saw. We're going to walk out here. It's called the Grand Plaza, and Temple 2 is located right there. And let's check them out. All right, so the Jaguar Temple, also called Temple 1, is called the Jaguar Temple because a tomb was discovered in the Jaguar Temple as well. And some of the artwork inside the tomb depicted the king and his throne had a jaguar over top of it. And that's where it got the nickname Jaguar Temple. Now, Maya kings often associated themselves with an animal, and many of them would be a powerful animal like an eagle or a jaguar, for example. Jaguars are the apex predator of the forest here. Now, this is interesting. So the Maya and many other Mesoamerican cultures played something called the ball game. So it was a game played with a ball, the ball game, and would be kind of similar to something maybe like soccer today or football. If you are from outside of the US, the rest of the world calls it football, by the way. And so you would hit this ball back and forth between two teams. Now, you could not use your hands or feet. You had to kind of hit it with the side of your hip. And the object is if you knocked it up through this hoop, there was a hoop up on the vertical wall. And if you knocked it through the hoop, your team won the game. Now, some of the hoops are still left in some of the cities because they're made of stone. The one that was here was probably made out of wood. That's why it's no longer here today. Mm-hmm. All right, and this is the front of Jaguar Temple, and the Jaguar Temple, the steps are really steep, and you're not allowed to go up here any longer. You used to be able to. There's a sign right here that says do not go up, and the reason they don't allow you up here any longer today is because someone fell off of there and got hurt, and it's just not safe. It's very steep. There's no hand railings. Sometimes when you go to some Maya sites around this part of the world, they'll have like a rope that's just dangling. It's like that's laid out down the middle of the steps so you can hold on to the rope as you walk up. We're going to go on top of Temple 2 in just a minute because we can go on top of Temple 2. As we take a look at some of the artwork on some of this, some of the bottom of some of these temples around the Great Plaza, we can see a big carving of a face, and that was about 6 or 7 feet tall. And some of these are covered up to kind of protect them. Takes a lot of work climbing up and down these pyramids. I actually met someone that had to go to the hospital after spending a whole day here. She got really dehydrated. So again, it's very important as you travel around the world, especially to hot tropical areas, and you're doing lots of strenuous activity. Remember to drink plenty of water. In fact, you guys should be doing that anyways at home. So once the Geo show is over, guys, go drink some water. All right, this is Temple 2. We're going to go to the back side of it because we can go on top of Temple 2 because they have a nice, safe, modern wooden staircase that they built on the back side. So we can go on top of Temple 2 and we can walk out to the front to get a bird's eye view of the Great Plaza. As we look back at the top of Temple 2, there's lots of carvings, and you can see that stucco. Remember, stucco is spread all over it. So again, use your imaginations as we turn around and look out over the Grand Plaza. Imagine everything covered in a bright white stucco, and then on top of that was painted either, well, here was mostly red color. So would have been painted. We saw a group just praying up there, and there's a group down here as well at the fire pits. Now, Maya people are still around today. Again, they're just not living in these great giant cities altogether like Tikal. Most of the people today living in more rural communities in the mountains of, say, Chiapas or Guatemala, for example. But people still come here, and it's still a religious site to Maya. Now, we're gonna, for the sake of time, we're gonna skip over a lot of the other lesser-known temples and pyramids and go all the way back to Temple 4, which is, if you remember, I said Jaguar Temple was 150 feet tall. And Jaguar Temple is this one right here. That's Temple 1. Temple 2, the one we were just on top of, is right there. This is Temple 3. We're currently standing on top of Temple 4, and Temple 4 is 210 feet tall or 22 stories tall. Pop quiz or survey to everyone out there. Do we have any fans of Star Wars here today?
Yes.
All right, so Star Wars fans, you may have seen this exact site before, if you know it or not. So the Millennium Falcon in this is my horrible picture of a Millennium Falcon. Looks like a mitt, right? Anyone here from Michigan today? All right, so the Millennium Falcon flies over this exact scene in the first Star Wars. It used to be my first Star Wars. To you guys, is probably Episode 4, and this is when they were flying into the Rebel base, and George Lucas came down here and shot this exact scene, and he pans across, and you can see the Millennium Falcon flying across the sky. So next time you go and watch the original one with Luke Skywalker, Episode 4, point that out to your parents, and you can surprise them with fun facts. All right, and we'll watch the sun go down on the backside of Temple 4 because sunsets are cool. And just to talk about the forest really quickly, remember all this forest that you see here would not be here when the Maya were living here at Tikal. Most of this would have been cleared out. Fields of corn would have been planted, would have been people, the city, the people's homes. But when we look at the forest today, lots of questions I often get are about the animals that live here. And most of the animals that live in this forest around Tikal are nocturnal. About 2/3 of all the animals, about 66% of all the animals here are nocturnal. That includes about 200 species of bats. Pretty crazy. All right, so it's so tall here, it sticks out of the tree canopies. You see evidence of old pyramids and temples that are still buried beneath the forest all around Tikal. You have to be careful. There's no railings on stuff. You can just climb in and out of things, and but you do want to be careful as you're visiting. You don't want to get injured. And inside, guys, I can't stress this enough. This wood right here, you don't see a lot of wood left around Tikal because there's termites in the jungle. That most of the wood is long gone that was once here. But inside one of the buildings, and again, this is a Corbel arch, that we see these beams going across, wooden beams were put here by Maya and would have been well over 1,000 years ago, and could have been even longer. As we see this picture from the late 1800s, you can see those wooden beams are still there, were there when this site was first uncovered. And there you have it, Tikal. So right before we open up for some Q&A, I do want to point this out because this is interesting to talk about. And from our earlier question about how did the Maya, or how do we know how the Maya built things? When we look at Jaguar Temple or Temple 1, you can notice there's a difference between the left side and the right side. So the left side has straight, sharp edges to that side, and the right side has more rounded edges. Now, why do you guys think that the right side has rounded edges and the left side has what looks like new construction? Well, that's because at one point, all of it was rounded. This is Jaguar Temple as it was being uncovered in the 1880s. And archaeologists, part of learning about the Maya is to try to recreate things. So that left side was actually reconstructed. And that's why that left side looks so much different from the right side, because it is not original. And this is a shot from on top of Jaguar Temple from 1882, and this is Temple 2, the one we went on top of, and Star Wars Temple 4 in the background. And you can see when they first cleared it out that it takes a lot of work to clear out that forest and to keep it clear as well. All right, we're going to answer just a couple of questions before we before we launch our Geo quiz, before some people have to go. Do people still speak Mayan, or do they speak Spanish now? Great question. So people like in Guatemala, for example, there's 30 or so, or 28 to 30, I believe, languages spoken in Guatemala. The primary language of the nation is Spanish, but not everyone is Maya in Guatemala, for example. So local small Maya communities, they still speak Mayan, but it's going to be different. So there's different versions of the Mayan language. However, many of the people do speak Spanish as well. So if you're Maya, you would most likely speak Spanish and your Mayan language. But if you're not Maya, then you probably don't speak a lot of Mayan if you live down there. All right, let's go over to Mrs. Campos' classroom. Looks like we have a question. Go for it.
How long did the Mayan civilization live?
Or how long did it last?
Yeah.
Right. So again, each of these cities would have been different. They have their own story. Tikal, for example, was started before the year 0. So a couple of hundred years into the BC years, Tikal was really started. It was one of the first major cities started leading into the classic period of the Maya. And that lasted all the way up to at Tikal. They went all the way up to 879. So it would have been about 1,000 years or so. It was inhabited with people in Tikal. Palenque, much shorter. It did not start as soon, and it lasted until 799. The Maya did not disappear. Most of them went and started either smaller cities like Tulum, which maybe I'll show you some after our quiz, and or they lived in really small rural communities in the mountains. There were a couple of very large, powerful cities in the post-classic period, like Chichen Itza. However, it was not as common as, say, the classic period. Okay, let's go over to our other classroom in Illinois, over in Carroll Springs. Let's go for it. Sorry.
Hi, my name is Max, and why is it called the Grand Plaza?
Yeah, so here's something we need to keep in mind is everything that we refer to today at, say, Tikal or Palenque. In fact, the city names were not Tikal and Palenque. These are names that were given to them in the late 1800s, when many of these sites were rediscovered and uncovered from the jungles. And these are names, local names that are given to them today. That was not the Maya name for their cities. They had a different name that was in the Mayan language, or the particular Mayan language that they had. And so when we refer to things like the Jaguar Temple or the Grand Plaza, this is something that archaeologists, people that go and study these places, and many of those people were English language speakers. So when they give names to these, those are just names that we can look at it and we can think and talk easily about them. But this is not what the Maya called it. This is, when we look at it, we call it the Grand Plaza, people that study Tikal, because that was the religious center. If we keep going with our New York analogy, you can think of it as like Times Square of Tikal. So it's just a very populated area where people come to see, in this case, many of their religious ceremonies and bigger ceremonies would have happened in this area. We call it the religious center of the city. And that's why it's called the Grand Plaza by people that study this area. But the Maya definitely would not have called it that. Let's see, lots of great pictures. Do we have any questions over on Twitter? Do not see them. All right, so we're a little bit past our time, so we're going to go ahead and launch our quiz. Feel free to head out at any point to fit your schedule. If you have time to stick around, I'm going to continue answering questions and maybe even show you Tulum afterwards if you have time to stick around. If you have to head out at any time, again, feel free. This is use at your own time. All right. Every question from here on out is going to be worth points. So make sure you answer quickly and correctly. I'm going to skip this one really quickly. And so we're going to launch our quiz in 5, 4, 3, 2. Make sure you got your devices and you're ready to go. You only get 10 seconds. Do it. Are the Maya still around today? Blue, yes. Red, no. Yes, Maya are still around today. All right, so Mighty Owl takes the lead. In Maya writing, what number does the seashell represent? What number does the shell represent? 5, 10, 0, or 1? All right, it is 0. Great job, Magic Dragon. Where did the Maya come from? Where did they migrate from? Was it from Europe, South America, Central Mexico, or Africa? All right, Central Mexico, about 12,000 years ago, they came down into the lowlands of Guatemala and Central America and started building those very ginormous city-states. All right, great job. And our leader is Amazing Dragon. The Maya used what to write? They used glyphs, lines, emojis, or letters. Glyphs. We use emojis today, but they use glyphs, so we call them glyphs. All right, amazing dragons. So in the lead, what city was most like modern day New York City? Meaning it had very tall buildings, had lots of people living there. Was it Tikal, blue, or Palenque, yellow? All right, it was Tikal. All right, great job. And today's winner is dun 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 dun. Mighty Owl. If you're a Mighty Owls teacher, please send me your school address. You can do that in one place only. And that's over at learnaroundtheworld.com/prize. learnaroundtheworld.com/prize. That URL right there. For everyone else, if you have to head out, have a fantastic day. I hope this inspires you to go out and learn more about the Maya. Because there are a fantastic group of people to study. Many of the things that we have today, especially foods like corn, chocolate, beans, avocados, all kinds of food that we use today, we can thank Mesoamerican cultures, which the Maya were one of those for those foods. All right, let's go over to Carol's stream first. Do you guys have a question?
Are there other Mayan ruins sites besides these three?
Yeah, there are lots of them. So there are many. So when you travel to this area of the world, there's many small sites. Tikal is one of the most famous. Palenque is one of the most famous. And Palenque not as much for its size, but more because of its uniqueness and because of all the fantastic glyphs, intact glyphs and artwork that was found there, and its importance for the tombs that were found there as well. So yeah, so they all are very important, the ones that we saw today, but there are many of them, lots of different ones that you see all over the place when you travel in this part of the world. Great question though. Let's go over to our other class in Illinois. Do you guys have a question over there?
What is special about the Mayans?
What is special?
Yes.
Yeah, I think, well, if you like history and you like studying about people, it's very special because they're a very unique culture. And then, as I was just saying, you know, when we think about things today, when we think about the concept of zero, when we think about much of the food, do you guys like chocolate? I thought you would. Now the Maya, they didn't eat really sweet chocolate like you would think of today. They would make something that's kind of like a hot chocolate drink, and it wasn't sweetened though, and that's the format that they would consume the chocolate with. And but yeah, so we can thank them for many of those foods that we enjoy today. And corn, the Maya believed that they were descendants of corn. They believed they were the children of corn. And remember, as I stressed earlier, not each city, they were not all the same. Very similar, but not the exact same. There were at least one I know of that's, in fact, when they were babies, some of them would actually squeeze the skulls of the babies. So they would wrap really tight around their head. And this is not the only culture in the world that has done this, by the way. But anyways, they would squeeze around the skull because when you're first born, your bones are really, really soft. So you can actually shape your bones. So by wrapping really tight around their forehead, they made their head a cone shape. How wild is that? And the reason they did that is because it would make them look more like an ear of corn. And because they believed they were the children of corn and they wanted to look more like corn. So that's interesting, but I do want to say that was just one of the cities that did not include all Maya and Maya today. I'm not aware of anyone that does that today. Great question. Over on our Q&A app, Mrs. Bordner's classroom wants to know, did they collect rainwater to drink it? So yes, and particularly in Tikal, there were no rivers that went through this area or through their city. So they actually built these reservoirs that would collect rainwater. They use that for irrigation, and they use that for drinking water as well. Okay, so for our classrooms that are still with us, we'll show you a quick some bonus footage of Tulum. So Tulum was a different style of city. This was what happened in what we call the post-classic period. Lots fewer people lived here. Only about 1,000 to 1,600 people lived in Tulum. It was at its height around 13th to 15th centuries, so in the 1500s. So Tulum still had people in it when the Spanish arrived in the 1500s. So when you first get to Tulum, Tulum is an easy one to visit if you, say, for example, can't go hiking into the jungles. It's located right off a highway, right on the beach, and just south of Cancun, if you've ever heard of Cancun before. And when you go there, you'll see lots of iguanas, as we just saw. And it's covered on, or it's bordered by 3 walls, and you only need 3 walls to protect the city because one side of this city is ocean, the Caribbean Sea there. You see how beautiful that Caribbean Sea is. And let's go ahead and walk under the wall into the city. Now, what you'll see here at Tulum, Tulum is built a lot smaller, and it's a lot lower in height, meaning all the buildings that you see are typically only about 1 story high, as we see the beautiful Caribbean Sea there. And so it's not these big, tall pyramids that the Maya are building any longer in the post-classic period. Tulum was an important trade city. So remember, the city-states, they would trade with one another. And so an inland city-state may produce or harvest, say, chocolate beans, for example, and they may trade with a coastal city. But many of the trade routes would run through Tulum in this part of the world. And so it was very important for trade. There are 2 beaches inside the city walls. One of them today, they close off for sea turtles to lay their eggs. The other one you can go swimming and play on. As you look around, again, not very big compared to the other 2. In fact, this is the largest. This was their main religious temple, and you can see it's not very tall at all, only about 2 or 3 stories high at Tulum. Now, Tulum, when we think about Maya people, now one of the old beliefs that we no longer have today, obviously, is that the Maya just disappeared. Well, we know that the classic cities like Tikal and Palenque, there was massive drought and starvation, so people rose against their rulers and just left, abandoned their cities. But then they formed smaller towns, smaller communities. They were still around, but here's the very sad history of not only Maya, but other Mesoamerican cultures like Aztecs, like the Zapotec as well, is that it's about 90% of them within 100 years of the Spanish arriving, about 90% of all the Mesoamerican cultures, Mesoamerican people died within 100 years. And that's wild to even think about that much death. And the reason being, look how big that palm leaf is right there. And so the reason that is because of the European diseases, things like smallpox, things like the plague. You may have heard of the Black Plague before. These kinds of diseases just completely devastated the indigenous peoples, not only of Central America, but all throughout the Americas. Many of you are probably familiar with the story of the Pilgrims. The reason the Pilgrims even had a place to live is because that entire area, basically everyone had died just a few short years earlier. That was already inhabited by the indigenous people there, and they died of the Black Plague. It just wiped out so many people. These diseases that they did not have, their immune systems were not built up to handle these diseases. So yeah, let's go ahead and open it up for some more questions. You can be about Tulum, Tikal, Palenque, anything we talked about today. And looks like we got one ready to go. So let's go over to Carol Springs. Go for it. Or stream. Sorry, go for it.
Did they use the type of money?
Yes, they did use money, but not like we think of money today. They did not print it on paper or make coins. Instead, they used natural items. So one of those were cocoa beans. So the chocolate beans they use as a form of currency, form of money. There were other things that different Mesoamerican cultures used as well. but typically they were some type of natural item that you would find, and so they would use that as a type of currency. There you go. And it was very important to them because they would trade. The Maya had very extravagant or extensive trade networks set up, especially when you think of cities like Tikal that were in the middle of the lowlands of Guatemala. They were trading with many of the other cities very far away. Okay, let's go over to our other classroom in Illinois, Mrs. Campos's class. Do you guys have a question? No questions right now. All right, we'll go right back over to, you guys have a question?
What does the word Tulum mean?
Tulum? I don't think it has a meaning, and if it does, like a specific meaning, like city by the sea. If it does, I'll have to look into it and post that over to Flipgrid, but I'm not aware of any specific meaning off the top of my head. All right, so for our classrooms that are still here with us, we're just going to close out the show with, again, a little bit more bonus footage for you guys. And you can, again, feel free to head out at any point, but we are going to show you a little bit about some of the, about some of the animals that live around Tikal. So here are some animals that we found living in and around Tikal. So the first one we have up is a cousin of the raccoon. The coati is what it's called. And you can look at him. He's a very cute little mammal. You can see that striped tail. So you can see it's a relative of the raccoon. Look at his little nose when he's drinking water. So cute. They are scavengers. They hang around the trash cans at Tikal just like raccoons do, and not very scared of people. It's very brave little guy. Look at her. I believe that was a girl. Lots of lizards all over. We saw some iguanas at Tulum earlier. So lots of lizards found. Remember, it's very hot here. You see them crawling all over the rocks, all over the pyramids and the temples. And just like the Maya cities, that some of them warred and fought with one another, then some of these lizards fight with one another as well. And so we see this guy dive in from the top rope. Look at that dinosaur battle. All right. So we have some lizards that we found all over the place. Anyone have a guess of what this thing is? All right, it does kind of look like a beehive, right? This is a termite nest. So have you guys ever heard of termites?
Yeah.
What do termites eat? Wood. So lots of people ask, why aren't there, any of their homes, the common people, why aren't there homes left any longer? Well, one, it's over 1,000 years ago that this city was abandoned, and termites would have ate that wood up really fast as well. So you see lots of those around in the jungles. And this is, we were talking earlier about collecting rainwater. So here's one of those reservoirs that's common at Tikal. As you saw the sign that says there, crocodile danger. So there's some crocodiles here. So definitely don't want to go swimming there. Does anyone have a guess of what this bird is?
Turkey.
All right, turkey. Does that look like the turkey that you think of?
Yes.
All right. Kinda. What turkey's this colorful in the U.S.? All right. So it's a different kind of turkey. It is a turkey, but they're more colorful down here in the tropical Central America than the typical black and brown turkeys that we see and find throughout much of what is the U.S. today. You see any animals up in the trees?
Yeah.
All right. What is it?
Monkey.
Monkeys. All right, so there's two species of monkeys that we're going to see. One is up there, the ones moving slowly. Those are howler monkeys, the black howler monkeys. And this next one, there's those black howler monkeys. They're kind of hard to see because it's really bright and they're backlit, so it's hard to get a good shot of them. But this guy is a lot a little bit more brave, a little bit more curious. It's a spider monkey, and you can kind of see him how he's just chillaxing, hanging out in the trees, big long arms. Remember, I said many of the animals here, 2/3 of them are nocturnal, and here's one of them, tarantula. All right, and even the plants here can be dangerous. So often, here's a good piece of advice. If you ever find yourself hiking through the jungles of Central America, if you ever fall, if you ever take a trip, which is common when you're tripping over roots and rocks and things in the forest, typically what we do when we trip up is the natural thing that we do is we trip and we put our hands out in front of us. So that can become very dangerous in the jungles here because many of the plants that are here, the tree species, they actually have very sharp thorns, some of them really, really long that stick out in their bark. So if you put your hands out, those thorns are going to go right into your hands. So you want to make sure that you're not just grabbing onto any old tree right beside you. If you take a spill, you might just want to hit the ground, maybe a little safer for you. All right, guys, well, that's going to do it for us today. We're well over our time. Thank you, everyone, for spending extra time with us today and learning about the Maya in this area of the world. I encourage all of you to do more research, fabulous culture and fabulous region of the world. And I hope one day when you all get older, you actually go there on your own field trip. So until next time, I'm GOB. You've been watching the Geo Show. It's a great big world out there. So keep exploring, guys. Bye.
Bye.